Good morning, everyone, and thank you guys for being here. Shai, Jeff, Carolina, thank you so much. Beauty is an industry that loves the new. Every year, there are dozens of brands that capture attention, they build buzz, and they generate early excitement. But the reality is that very few brands successfully make the transition from hot startup to enduring business, and we have three who have here. Once the initial momentum fades, everyone who's a brand founder or operator in the room knows that that's when the real work begins. And so that's when it's time to start building teams and managing cash flow and navigating retail relationships, continuing to innovate and continuing to have to figure out how to stay relevant in a market that moves really, really fast. So today we're talking with three founders who many of you know, who have successfully navigated that transition. And in fact, all three of them are alums of our Future 50 list. So Shai at Bubble was on the list in 2023, and both Dibs and OneSkin were on the list in 2024. And since being named Future 50 brands, they've continued to grow, they've continued to evolve, and they've proved they're building businesses with real staying power. Each of them has taken a slightly different path to sort of get here today. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. Shai has built Bubble into one of the most successful Gen Z skincare brands in the market with really unique distribution and an incredibly engaged community. Carolina built OneSkin at the intersection of biotech and beauty. Before that was cool, by the way. Bringing deep science and clinical credibility into the skincare conversation. And Jeff has built Dibs into one of the fastest growing color brands in retail with a very, very hands-on approach to building relationships with both his retail partners and his customers. And so welcome home, welcome back, guys. We're so happy to have you here today. So let me start with a question for everyone. I want to go back to that moment when your brands first started to break through. Obviously, all of you guys had early momentum, which is why we put you on the Future 50 list. But I'm curious to know when you knew you were onto something bigger than just the buzz around your brands. So Shai, let's start with you.
Such an interesting question because I feel like you kind of never know. I think that it's always surreal when you hear people say, oh, I love your product so much, or we use your products in the family. But I think that in general, as a founder, and for us, as we scaled everything independently and recently crossed 500 million in retail sales.
Congrats.
Thank you. It still feels surreal, and you still feel exactly the same as it was in the first year. So I feel like we all look at people from the outside and think to ourselves, oh, they're so successful and so amazing, but actually it doesn't ever feel like that. You kind of feel like you always need to do more.
Jeff, how about you? What was the moment you knew you were onto something?
I'm just going to echo Shai here. You never feel that. And in fact, I think when you look at the much larger brands that we might have looked up to before, the life cycle of a brand is so compressed now that I don't think anyone can arguably feel that they've ever made it. Maybe one point of confidence was the first time that a customer came up to us and said, I repurchased the first thing I bought from you. And that told us, okay, you bought it first because we are an influencer-founded brand, and that's amazing to get people in through the door and the immediate spike, but wow, you actually liked it enough to buy it again. Oh God, thank God, we have some level of product market fit, even in this tiny sample size.
I love that. Yeah, it's always so cool when you actually meet someone who has made the choice in a very crowded market to purchase your product, and then to do it twice is always incredible. Carolina, how about you? Like, what was that moment for you, if there was one?
Yeah, I think, similar to what they said, when we launched, we saw this really strong retention rate, and so that already gave us confidence that we had a good product and customers were coming back. But we still didn't know how we are gonna make this a sustainable and scalable business. And the first year that we launched was like a tough year, trying to test different channels and see what resonates. And we always bet a lot on trying to connect with experts in our field and have them knowing about our science and eventually our product and our position as a brand. And one day, and on the second year, like we were in a very tough moment as a brand. We're almost like running out of money. And I wake up, I go to look at Shopify. That's the first thing that I do almost every day. And the sales were like 10 times higher than they were like the previous day. And I go to the growth team and I ask like, oh, what's going on? Is there any creative like performing super well? And they said, nothing out of the normal. And then we found that OneSkin was mentioned like in a podcast, like from David Sinclair, who is like a longevity Harvard expert. And in the same day, OneSkin was also mentioned in Tony Robbins' book that we got to connect because Peter Diamandis was one of our advisors. So that moment really transformed the OneSkin trajectory because we brought so much organic traffic and really high quality customers that were interested in the science, interested in our position, in our messaging as a brand of improving more than the appearance, the health of the skin. And that year we grew like 8 times, we became profitable. So that gave us a lot of confidence that we found the channel, like the niche that we could bet on. And then from there, we start to amplify in that same approach.
Love it. Shai, I think you and I met in like 2020, which I remember you were like telling me about like the Facebook group and how you were engaging, and to hear that you're doing 500 million at retail, not what is it, 6 years later, is absolutely crazy to me. So you've grown so incredibly quickly, and I'm convinced that one day you'll be the subject of like a Harvard Business School case study on how to grow a brand. But for everyone here today, when you look back at the early days of Bubble, what were the key strategic decisions that helped you turn early momentum into that sustained growth that you've been able to find?
So I would say, first of all, I have this persistent cough, so I apologize if I'm going to cough in front of all of you. So I think that there's a lot of different things that we did that were slightly different and were very different to the playbook that everybody said that we should do. Like the first thing was really building with our community. So our community was the heart of the brand since inception. We have today more than 100,000 ambassadors, who truly helps us decide everything. And they helped shape the brand and even choose the name, the packaging, test the formulation. And they have really helped us think through retail strategies. So our first retail partner was Walmart. People thought it's not the obvious decision. And 8 months after launch, we launched in 4,000 doors, which again, a lot of people said it's a very risky decision for an indie brand. There's a lot of things when it comes to retail strategy, when it comes to even thinking through our price point. We don't have traditional beauty margins, and it's actually something that we're very proud of because we actually price our products based on what the consumer can pay, and it all because we listen to our community. So I would say listening to our community has been what shaped the brand in every way and helped us make a lot of decisions that were really not obvious, and honestly, a lot of people in the industry thought that are completely crazy, but really helped shape the brand to where it is today.
Yeah, I love that. Carolina, OneSkin took a very different path than most beauty startups at the time. You built a brand that was grounded in biotech and scientific research. Who would have thought that in 2026 that would be like sort of a premier sort of playbook for beauty? That research began in 2016, which was 5 years before you launched your first product in 2021. What were like the biggest challenges in translating a science-driven concept into something that resonated with customers?
Yeah, and interesting enough, right? We're turning 10 years right now as a company, and people always think about the overnight success. But as you said, even to get to our product, it took us like 5 years. We invested like over 7 million in just doing the research to find this new peptide that is the core of our products. And once we decided to launch a brand, we basically saw an opportunity to bring skin into the longevity conversation. We were seeing what was going on in Silicon Valley, a lot of longevity brands, longevity companies, they're starting out to target aging in different parts of your body. No one was thinking of your skin from that lens. And in a similar way, we also saw an opportunity to eventually bring the longevity conversation to the skincare space, which is now becoming, very buzzy. But, back in 2016, we already saw that opportunity. And when we decided to launch a brand, and we saw that there was this wide space that we could be the brand that could fill this gap. We didn't know exactly how we would, what would be the platform that we would use to connect with these early adopters. And so eventually we start with the, obvious kind of, Meta and some influencers. But eventually we found what, worked for us was to find the experts, the KOLs, and then even podcasts for us, like, is one of the channels that works super well. So it was about finding the platform and the right allies, if you will, that help us to spread that messaging, that complex science, but that these were people that were already interested in innovation, in health and optimization, and they could resonate really well with this new approach. So once we found that channel, then that's what I said, like we started to double down and find more partners there, and then eventually diversify and try to reach the consumer, whatever they are. But that's what really helped us to break through using these, experts' voices in our field.
Yeah, I want to just follow up really quickly because you and I have talked about, I think, one of the bigger challenges for you early in your brand, which was fundraising, right? So did I hear you say you spent $7 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you spent $7 million on research and development, exploring peptides before you had a commercially viable product and sales to point to. So I can understand why a traditional beauty investor, why that's a challenge. We just released our 2026 BeautyMatter Dealmaker Survey, and 56% of dealmakers said that brands with patented ingredients and technology were among the most transactable brand profiles for investment and M&A this year. And that, by the way, was second only to profitability or path to profitability. So investors have maybe changed a little bit. So what do you think has changed that has gotten traditional beauty investors focused on science-led brands? And maybe tell us quickly, like, how did you get investors comfortable with OneSkin, given that not only are you science-led, but you're also D2C, right?
Yeah. For us, as you said, like, fundraising was always challenging in the beginning. We always need to find people that believed in the vision and even believed in this, in the power of, like, the technology, the science, before we actually were able to commercialize. So in the beginning, we had the angel investors more focused on the biotech side and the longevity than the consumer, the brand side. And only once we launched the product, we got traction, we got profitable, then we were able to attract the consumer investors that now we have, like, proved ourselves. We have a sustainable business, and by the way, we have a really strong differentiation technology. Then investors got comfortable, but again, it took us like a few years to get there. And I think in general, more investors or strategics are excited about IP ingredients because the defensibility it's much clearer, right? I think you can create a viral brand, but how you can make sure that that brand is unique and continues to stay relevant over time, it's by being able to have a really strong moat. Like, what is that your brand does that no one else can do, and you can do better than anyone, and you can continue to improve and be the best in it. And I think this IP, this is strong, like, science innovation team brings that and allows the brand to stay relevant.
Jeff, obviously Dibs has grown really rapidly. First, you guys were a D2C brand, and then I think it was August of 2024, you launched a partnership with Ulta. From your perspective, what are some of the most important factors to successfully scale a brand in physical retail today?
Pick your right partner. I mean, I think one of the things that you hear from a lot of brands right now is, what is the retailer doing to build my brand? And I have never had that conversation and heard any specificity in terms of what the brand actually wants, right? This retailer was amazing at pouring gasoline on our brand, but exactly what did they do, right? And for us, we knew very clearly that we wanted to be in Ulta Beauty. This was the dream for us because we were building a 50-state brand to appeal to women who felt intimidated by makeup and wanted that broken down for them. And so when we came in, we have a very clear idea of the kind of partner we were looking for, and that's a thought partner, someone capable of telling us very specifically what are the deficiencies in how you're marketing, specifically which product white spaces should you be going, and also thinking through the challenges of being in retail. And one of the key points for us is that specificity. I drove down to every single door. The store report is handed to me at 7 a.m. every Monday, and I have been to almost 500 doors in all 50 states. And that is not a case where I walk into a door and walk out and adjust the merch. I spend 8 to 10 hours at times working shifts. My board knows that this is not taking time away from my day job, but rather taking away time from the family and pet obligations that I do not have. But the most important piece, right, of all of this is establishing that specificity of relationships as well. We obsess every day at Dibs about including AI and integrating it into every part of our operation, right? And every decision maker in this company is required to use a centralized AI platform. And obviously that leads to a lot of questions of human redundancy. But the most powerful parts of our relationship with our retailer are truly, I can tell you, very specific stores that I am in contact with or a member of my team is every single week. And 1899 Chelsea, I try not to go in there because, and have them see me because it becomes a 8-hour conversation. 462 Fargo, I'm there multiple times a year. And the point of it is when you drill down to that level, you are able, I think, to survive and thrive in what is a very dominating retailer with over 1,500 doors.
Yeah, so we're going to dig into each of these strategies a little bit more for the next couple of minutes. So, because I think these guys have so much to add, and I've loved talking to them about all of their strategies. So, Shai, as you mentioned, Bubble really took a very thoughtful and some might say unconventional approach to physical retail distribution when you launched with Walmart, and as you explained, sort of scaled from there. You also, you've also highlighted, why choosing the right retailer in each market and then working directly with them has been sort of a key strategy for you. So maybe unpack that for us. Tell us why that strategy has worked so well for Bubble.
So accessibility is a very big part of our mission and a very big part of who we are as a brand. Because one of the biggest things we've learned when we conducted the initial research and worked and basically built a brand together with our community was the fact that products that they were excited about weren't accessible to them. And again, I apologize for my voice. This cough is not going away. But it really is, accessibility for us is so much more than just ensuring that the prices are affordable. It's also about really being in the right retail distribution for every market that we operate in. And really ensuring that our consumers, whether they have a driving license or if they are not living in areas that are very, very accessible, that they could actually go and buy the products in store. So today we're available in 18,000 stores worldwide. We're available in the US in Walmart, Target, Ulta, CVS, Amazon, in the UK in Boots, and in Canada, Shoppers Drug Mart and Walmart Canada. And accessibility is extremely important to how we operate.
And you go, what I think is so interesting is that, you go to each, instead of giving one retailer a global exclusive, for example, you go to each market and you decide which is the best retailer for Bubble and for your customers in that market, which I think is really unique. It's a skill set that, frankly, a lot of brands don't have internally or embrace.
Yeah, it makes the business operationally a lot more complicated because the way we operate is we need to service very different retailers, very different needs, very different operational processes. Even it's kind of crazy to talk about that, but even sometimes how much time we spend on deductions, it's things that they don't tell you when you start building a brand of how important this is to handle deductions properly. Because every retailer, especially in different regions, has such different needs. But for us, it's so important to ensure that it doesn't matter if we are, now we recently launched in the Nordics in Madison Kicks, because that's the right retailer for the Nordics. In the Middle East, we launched in Sephora because in the Middle East, Sephora was the right partner for us. So we operate in a way that we always research the market and the landscape and what retailers operate there and what is the most accessible and where is the right place for the brand to play. And we like to say that also we're very fortunate because the brand can truly play in both mass and prestige environments and thrive in both, which is, doesn't usually happen with most brands.
Yeah, so smart. Carolina, OneSkin built much of its early success through D2C and a subscription model while also maintaining a relatively focused product portfolio. Why was that level of focus important for the brand sort of in the early days, and why do you think D2C works so well for you?
Yeah, I think, well, one, we have a very small team and we couldn't even try to, launch many products at once. But also, we knew that we wanted this product to be that product that people would trust to invest in their skin as part of kind of, their longevity, their health approach. And if they liked the product, if they believed in the site, if they saw the results, we thought that this should be a product that they should use for the rest of their lives. So we bet on subscription, which was like an interesting bet at that time, because very rarely, skincare customers will subscribe. But for us, it worked because first we had one product, was a very simple approach to skincare routine in order like trying to simplify, but also position this product as like a foundation, an essential step of your routine. And that allowed us like to learn, how to commercialize, how to bring the product to market, how to understand like which customers, the profile, the demographics. We got this data because we were constantly talking with our customers, and then they helped us decide how we would grow the portfolio. But as you said, we still are very intentional about our portfolio because subscription is still a huge part of our business. Recurrent revenue is 70% of our business. So we don't want to overwhelm our customers with too many options. We want to make sure that we are simplifying their routine, and then they can subscribe and they can just like kind of be done, and that helps us to build a sustainable business because of this strong recurrent revenue, and learn why we grow, and then be very thoughtful about how we grow the portfolio.
You've used the term longevity a lot today, and I know you've been using it for years. With more and more brands sort of using that term in their marketing, how do you maintain your unique position in a market that's becoming a little bit more crowded in terms of this concept of longevity?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've been seeing like this shift now. A lot of the brands that before used anti-aging, they're just like swapping the word for longevity. For us, this was never a marketing strategy. For us, this is who we are and how we believed that we were bringing like a new approach to to treat your skin, and so for us, it's really staying consistent to who we are as a brand, and as founders, continue to explain what does it mean to be a longevity brand. Like, are you targeting a key hallmark of aging? Can you measure the impact of this, your product, your intervention? Can you publish this data? Because to me, what differentiates longevity from everything else is that it's evidence-based. You need to be able to really prove and substantiate everything that you say. There should be a mechanism behind. And obviously, why we're doing all of that? Because we want to deliver the most effective cost product to our customers. And so for us, it's just continue to do what we have been doing for this past 10 years. And I think the consumer is getting smarter and smarter, and will be able to differentiate who is just like using this as a marketing opportunity, and those that are actually legit about being a longevity brand.
Yeah. Jeff, you really are one of those like really special founders, and I love
Completely psycho.
that too. No, in the best way possible only. No, I just love the notion of you challenging yourself to be in, I guess, 500 stores in every one of the
Every
states
state.
of the union, which is pretty incredible, which I'm sure was really fun just to see the country. But it's also so cool for your customers, right? So when the customer walks in and sees the founder work in
They often don't care.
they don't care. Well, I think it's really cool.
That they don't need discount Patrick Todd to sell them like makeup, right? Come on, I was gonna make your morning exciting. But all right,
Well, like I guess it's like what insights, like being there and like experiencing, the product with the customer on the shop floor, gives you some insights that you might not be able to get from a dashboard or a sales report. Like, what are some of those insights? What have you learned from being in the store?
Okay, in all seriousness, right, there are many customers who do care. That they care that a full-time employee, and it's not that you're a founder, a CEO, you're a field coordinator, whatever, is there speaking for the brand. We have the luxury of being young brands here, where we're not Mrs. Estee Lauder RIP, right? Like we're real breathing people here, right? And people can associate that with the brand, right? Like there is that added dimension of discovery and emotion. And I truly do believe that, as politically incorrect as it might be in store. And I think one of the other pieces that is really important is actually how you observe your customer. The customer, in our experience, is never going to tell us exactly what she wants in a way that tells us the right answer. Right? In fact, in many cases, we've made our biggest errors in product development or brand development by going to where the customer told us that she wanted to go. Because sometimes they're not phrasing their desire in the way that actually can be translatable directly. The most valuable insights I get is candidly being we joke that I'm a NORA need officer right away, but literally the creeper around the aisle, watching the customer, trailing her around the store. And kind of like, because that tells you everything about how she enters an environment like an Ulta Beauty, how she goes into that, what motivates her, and then what tells you is right or wrong about your own VM and your choices. We also have a rule, by the way, that every time we are in a store, we sell everything in the store. The store, the people that come in are the guests. They are our customers, or even if they aren't buying from our brand. So, for example, I'm terrible at selling makeup. I have sold thousands of dollars of The Ordinary and Burberry Hero when I'm in a store. Right? There is no, sorry, I don't work here. It's usually, what can I help you with? What are you looking for? You take them around the store. If you don't have the key, you ask the front desk for the key. And then, by the way, have you heard of this great brand Dibs? And by then, they filled their cart with other brands. But the last thing I'll say about it, right, is nobody has, in many cases, the time and resources to kind of do this kind of obsessive quest, right? But what is really important is remembering that there are partners that you can choose in all aspects of your professional relationship that share that kind of value.
Yeah.
That share that value of showing up and staying there.
Yeah. We actually are, you guys have been so generous with all the information that you're sharing. We're actually running a little tighter on time. So I want to kind of jump to something that came up a lot when we were chatting for our prep call for this. And that is the founder mindset. So, from the outside looking in, each of you could write a textbook on how to successfully launch and scale a beauty brand. But as every founder in the room knows, myself included, it's not always easy and the lines aren't always straight. And so I want to ask each of you, what's been the hardest part of scaling the business that people outside of the company probably don't see? And Shai, why don't we start with you?
So I would say we scaled the business very differently than I would say the traditional playbook, because we've scaled it very independently. We didn't take private equity capital. We became profitable very early on. And basically everybody in the industry thought we're completely crazy with the way we're approaching things. And I think that, there's a lot of things that they don't tell you when you start a brand. They don't tell you how important it is to manage cash flow. They don't tell you how important it is. We can joke about it, but like managing deductions, that's actually a really important aspect, especially when you scale with mass retailers. Nobody tells you that you need to update your ASINs, for example. It sounds really weird, but it's something that you really deal with. So I think that there's a lot of aspects of the business that is about truly like really tight operational day-to-day management of being an operator and really looking at the small things that are not exciting. They're not fun. They're not, but they are so important. And for us, these are the things that really kind of helped us scale without needing to take external capital and really be able to scale in a very efficient way. And people, eventually your team is everything.
Yeah.
And I think building the right team, and the team that takes you from 0 to 50 is not the team that will take you from 50 to 100. And often you need to adapt when you scale between the 100 to 300. And really kind of learning, and it's the hardest part, I would say, as running a business. And I think everybody here can agree that, you know, your team is everything. And in ensuring that you adapt the operation, and we have team members that have been incredible and unbelievable leaders that have really scaled with us. But there are also areas that, you know, you need to adapt the business to to your scale. So I would say these are really the areas that are not the exciting parts that people talk about, but are the most important to really scaling a business.
Yeah. Jeff, how about you? What's been the hardest part of scaling that people don't often see?
Sublimating your ego as a founder, right? Because as a founder, first and foremost, I think there's a pressure that all thought leadership should come from yourself, right? Like you need to be that source. And one of the more humbling things is actually to see much larger organizations or partners come to the table with true thought leadership that has impacted or even redirected our strategy in a positive way. So I have to give props to TikTok in particular, their leadership under Ajay Sapikar. We've learned so much about our own business and brand building through them. Similarly, you'll hear me sing Ulta's praises. They are fast movers in every conceivable space we learn when we go into market. But on top of basically accepting that there are others out there with great ideas that can accrete into your business, I think it's also really important to understand that the fundamental part of your P&L on top of the actual numbers is the team that is executing it and the spirit with which they're executing it. And in many cases, we do find that our external partners have been surprisingly both the source of margin accretive value, but also morale accretive value. And I think having partners that you look forward to doing business with every single day makes such a difference for your own team's ability to execute, even if they're not within that specific division.
Carolina, how about you?
I think for us, like two things. One is how to stay alive. You know, if you need, either we're gonna get, we're gonna be able to fundraise and have, a way to continue to support the brand until you get your profitability, and two, how you can attract, like early on when the brand is still small, like people that can help you to build that brand and believe in your mission. And for us, this was very challenging. This was like my first time, as an entrepreneur coming, from academia, a scientist. Like I haven't done this before. But I think in some ways I was able to attract the right people that believed in the mission and could either support with funding or eventually come in early on. And even if I couldn't pay them as a full-time, I worked with so many contractors and really smart people that help us, go through these early hard days. But I agree. I think once you get to a certain point, it's all about putting the right team together and helping and let them help you execute on the vision.
Well, all of you have done such a fantastic job. Obviously, we're going to continue to keep our eyes on you because you're doing some fantastic things. I think we have time for one question. So does anyone have a question for anyone on stage? If not, I have another question. So. None? Okay. Let me find my last question.
I think she has a question.
Oh, there's a question? Okay, perfect. Do we have a mic? Oh, here we go.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for speaking today, and congrats on your continued success of your businesses. Can we give them a quick round of applause, people? Specifically, you did mention AI and kind of how it's playing a factor. There's conversations about whether or not that's going to kind of impede creativity or, how far it can go with limits. What do you think is one thing that retailers need to keep in mind, retail founders, retail executives need to keep in mind when integrating new technology into the business?
Ooh, I kind of want to throw it to the others as well. But I'll just very quickly say, right, I think you have to also remember that, right? I kind of go back to the start of search and the Alta Vista. Does anyone remember Alta Vista, right? Like the Alta Vista CEO, I think, went out and said, we have one, like search is over. We have one search. Where is search now, right? Where has search come since? Then it was Yahoo, then it was Google, and now we're searching in a completely different way. So I think if you let your team go out there and say, just go and implement AI, that's a recipe for panic, right? Like you have to have a very clear idea. First, I think as leadership, what are the specific use cases that you're trying to do? For example, something as simple as what are the things that you are doing 9 times every single day that can be automated, and what can be done to fix that, and then build it through. So I think that it is incredibly overwhelming to kind of start from the perspective of AI everything. But on the creative side, I do believe it's enormously value accretive in the sense that think about all the work that it takes to kind of put pen to paper on a very fuzzy idea and how much time you save by having that basic rendering, even if you're designing a bottle or you're coming up with an ad campaign, or even the basic copy, and then being able to iterate about that time that you saved in that first instance. I don't think the output is any less valuable or creative in and of itself, but you saved a lot of time to focus on that added value.
Does anyone else have anything to add?
I can say that I see this as an amazing amplifier. I think that it can't replace true creativity, but it could help make it better.
Yeah.
And we encourage AI in a very significant way in the business because it could save you so much time. It's such a force multiplier if it's used correctly. But you also need, we have constant conversation of like, which system do you use for what? Because it can make so many mistakes. So especially when it comes to Excel spreadsheets and areas like that, it needs to be checked, and it cannot truly replace human output, but it could be an amazing shortcut and amplifier.
Totally, and for those in the room that are middle-aged like I am, it's an area I think where people with some experience really excel. It's a piece of tech that finally like we can excel at because more so than younger people, because one, we know the questions to ask, right? So that takes some experience, I think, and we can pick up when it gets something wrong, like really quickly and adapt. Okay, I think we actually have time for one more question. So if anyone else has a question, I see Alyssa's rushing over here.
Hi, thanks, John. My question is for the entire panel. So, and you've answered this, in your own individual ways, but I'm looking for a bit more specificity. So in a sea of sameness, how do you plan on not only continuing to innovate, but, sort of stay relevant? Skincare is a big market, but it's also very precise. It's not just beauty. Some of your longevity claims require, especially if they're claims, right, require a bit more rigor, right? So that's my question.
Does anyone want to lead with that?
Yeah, I can start. I mean,
Okay.
for us, because we are founded by scientists and we still have 20% of our team that actually invest in the science and research and development, that's how we believe they're going to stay relevant. We're going to continue to invest in pushing the science forward and being like the pioneers and bringing new innovations and better ways to address aging in the skin and develop better products and run clinical studies and continue to outpace ourselves. Our goal is always like how we can develop something better than what we already have. And the reality is that this requires investment, and not every brand may be able to invest. So you need to find the right partners that will support. If you can put a team together and choose that path, what I would say is that a path that it gives you like a very clear differentiation, and obviously people are appreciating because everyone is looking for credibility, everyone is looking for efficacy, and that helps that sustainable business in terms of growth, because you build that trust, and that really helps as you scale the brand.
Shai, I know you had something to say. Do you want to take a second for the last word?
Yeah, so what I would say is for us, so people don't know that about Bubble, but Bubble is actually a derm-developed brand. We have a derm advisory board of 12 dermatologists. We conduct clinicals across our entire assortment. And we put so much effort. We have in-house product development team, in-house chemists. We have in-house clinicians as well that develop our clinical protocols. And it's really for us about being the first brand that, especially in mass, that really drives the connection between science, germ, but also emotion and joy. And really being able to innovate together with our dermatologists and our community and do it in a way that sparks emotion but drives efficacy like no other brand. So for us, it's really about how do we constantly ensure that we're not just building a trendy, cool products, but actually building the legacy products of the future that people always want to come back to. And that's why it takes us 2 to 3 years to develop products. That's why we can't just jump on a trend, but we do it very thoughtfully and intentionally together with our dermatologists and our community.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing such great information with us. And I'm sure we'll have you back at some point in the future with to keep us updated. So thanks again.
Thank
And
you.
thank you,
Happy
everyone.
good.